Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine the internet as we know it.
Yeah.
Websites, services, everything running on these massive server farms owned by just a few huge companies.
Right, the cloud giants.
Exactly. Now, what if you could rebuild all of that? Not just the websites, but the entire back-end software, the computation, data storage.
Everything behind the scenes.
And run it all on a completely decentralized network. Secure, resilient, and, free from those single points of control.
That's a pretty big picture.
It is. And that's the incredibly ambitious vision behind the Internet Computer, or ICP. We got quite a stack of sources for this deep dive, technical specs, roadmaps, a look at what people are actually building on it.
Yeah, lots of project examples.
And yes, even some insights into the native token itself.
So our goal today really is to sift through all this material, pull out the essential understanding.
Get to the core of it.
Exactly. And give you a clear picture of what the Internet Computer is trying to do, how its unique architecture makes that possible, and maybe why it's a truly different kind of player in the blockchain space.
Think of it as your guide, maybe your shortcut, to understanding a project that wants to take blockchain way beyond just finance.
Right. Not just DeFi.
It wants to become the backbone for, pretty much everything online. So let's start with that big picture. What exactly is the Internet Computer?
Fundamentally.
Yeah. Based on our sources, it's described as a blockchain-based general-purpose computing platform.
Okay.
The core idea is to essentially extend the public internet itself, sort of turning it into a global decentralized computer.
One capable of hosting any kind of back-end software.
Right.
Yeah. And the material we looked at really highlights the motivation there. It's about tackling some, let's say, fundamental problems with the traditional internet.
Like what specifically?
Things like the risk of censorship, the heavy reliance on centralized cloud providers.
Which creates vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Security vulnerabilities that come with that centralization, and also those constant battles over user data and privacy, Yeah,
that makes sense. And one source used a phrase I found really striking. It talked about accelerating blockchain singularity.
Blockchain singularity, what's the idea there?
The idea seems to be a future where most of the world's computation, like the bulk of it, runs directly on blockchain systems.
For security and decentralization.
Precisely. Unprecedented levels of it. So they're definitely not thinking small here.
Clearly not.
They're building this to host everything from, simple smart contracts all the way up to massive social media platforms or complex enterprise systems.
And the key is entirely on-chain, 100%.
That's the goal.
Right. And this vision, it isn't brand new. It started back in 2016 with the founder, Dominic Williams.
Okay.
And they raised significant funding, nearly $200 million, I think it was, from some pretty well-known investors back in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And the DFINITY Foundation is the main contributor, really driving the core R&D with a large team behind it.
Okay, so that covers the what and the why. Now, here's where it gets, for me anyway, really interesting. How does this decentralized internet actually work? Like, under the hood.
Yeah, the mechanics.
Our sources explain it runs on a network of specialized node machines.
Okay, so not just anyone running software on their laptop.
No, definitely not. These are high-spec machines installed in proper independent data centers and operated by independent providers across the globe.
Got it. And what holds it all together? What coordinates these nodes?
That's the Internet Computer Protocol itself, the ICP protocol.
Oh, okay.
This protocol is what makes sure every operation is secure, tamper-proof, verifiable across the whole network.
Right. So it essentially replaces the need for traditional centralized cloud servers like AWS or Google Cloud.
Exactly. And that makes the whole system incredibly resilient, supposedly.
More fault tolerant.
Yeah. Now, instead of traditional smart contracts like you'd find on, say, Ethereum or other chains, ICP uses something called canister smart contracts.
Canisters. Okay, what are those?
What the sources describe them as sort of self-contained, secure units. They hold both the code and the data for an application or maybe just a specific function.
Oh, interesting. Code and data bundled together securely.
Right.
Now, what's really fascinating here, I think, is how users actually interact with these canisters.
Call on.
The material really highlights this reverse gas model.
Reverse gas. How does that work?
Well, on most blockchains, you as the user, you need crypto, right? You have to pay gas fees for every little transaction.
Yeah, which can be a pain and a barrier.
Exactly. On ICP, the canister, so the application itself pays for its own computation and storage. It uses something called cycles, which it's pre-charged with.
Oh, wow. So the user doesn't need to hold tokens.
Precisely. Users can just interact with the dApps directly. No need for a wallet up front, no need to hold any crypto just to click a button.
That sounds like a massive difference for user experience. Huge.
It removes a major hurdle for, mainstream adoption.
And the sources also explain how these canisters can directly serve standard web traffic, like HTTP requests.
Ah, okay, so they act like web servers too.
Essentially, yeah. And this is key to that vision of hosting the entire application front-end and back-end directly on-chain.
So you don't need a separate, maybe centralized server just for your user interface.
Exactly. You can access it all through a regular web browser, apparently, seamlessly.
Okay, so if we connect this back to the bigger picture, hosting that entire stack on-chain, that's got to be one of the major differentiators, right?
It seems like it.
Because most quote-unquote decentralized applications today still rely heavily on centralized cloud providers like AWS or Azure for crucial parts of their infrastructure.
Right, like the front-end hosting or databases sometimes.
Yeah, which brings back those single points of failure and control that ICP is trying to eliminate in the first place.
Makes sense. The sources also put a lot of emphasis on identity, something called internet identity.
Tell me about that.
They talk about it as a core privacy feature. It uses cryptography to replace traditional passwords.
Okay, so no more remembering hundreds of passwords.
That's the idea. Instead of creating a new login for every single app, you use secure methods like passkeys or maybe your device's biometrics.
Like Face ID or fingerprint.
Yeah, those kinds of things to authenticate. The goal is a user-friendly but also anonymous way to log in across different dApps.
Without your activity being tracked between them. That's the privacy angle.
Exactly. And they mentioned over 1 million users are already using this system.
Wow, okay. That's significant adoption. What else stands out as unique?
Another unique capability they talk about is something called chain fusion.
Chain fusion.
It sounds powerful.
It uses some pretty advanced cryptography. They mentioned chain key cryptography and threshold ECDSA.
Okay, getting technical.
Yeah, but the upshot is it allows ICP canisters to natively sign transactions on other blockchains, like Bitcoin or Ethereum.
Natively. So without needing bridges. That's the key point. Without needing those traditional bridges, which are often complex and frankly have been major security risks in the crypto space.
That is a big deal. Bridges are a notorious weak point.
So this is highlighted as a way to significantly enhance DeFi and build genuinely cross-chain dApps directly on ICP.
So an app on ICP could directly control Bitcoin or assets on Ethereum.
Apparently so. The sources note that Bitcoin ordinals and Rune support and EVM support are already live.
Okay, so that's happening now.
Yeah, and integrations for Solana and Dogecoin are listed as being in progress, aiming for around June or July 2025.
Interesting. So they're actively expanding that cross-chain capability.
Seems like a core focus. And managing all of this, governing the whole network, is the network nervous system, or NNS.
The NNS, okay, the governance layer.
Right. The sources describe it as a large, on-chain, decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. It governs the ICP protocol itself, and it's noted as holding, get this, over $1 billion worth of value locked in it.
$1 billion. That's a serious DAO.
It is. And this system allows the network to be updated and controlled in a decentralized way, importantly, without needing disruptive hard forks.
Ah, smooth upgrades. That's valuable.
And if you hold ICP tokens, you can stake them in the NNS, participate in voting on proposals that shape the network's future.
And earn rewards for doing so. Typical staking model.
Exactly. Governance participation rewards. So with all this unique tech, you've got the canisters, the reverse gas, hosting the full stack, chain fusion. What are developers actually doing with it? Are people building stuff?
Well, based on the sources, yes. Quite a lot, it seems. They paint a picture of a really rapidly growing ecosystem.
Yeah.
They note over 4,000 public code repositories, which, is a pretty strong indicator of developer activity.
4,000 repos. Okay. That's substantial. What kinds of apps?
It really covers a wide range. It's definitely not just DeFi, although that's a significant part.
Right.
You see SocialFi platforms think decentralized social media like DSCVR and OpenChat.
Yeah.
OpenChat is particularly interesting. It's described as fully on-chain real-time messaging.
Fully on-chain chat. Wow.
Yeah, where you can even send crypto directly within the chat interface, including Bitcoin, thanks to that chain fusion tech.
Send Bitcoin in a chat message. That's pretty cool. Do they mention user numbers?
They do cite some figures. Over 200,000 users for DSCVR and around 80,000 for OpenChat, which is pretty decent for fully on-chain platforms.
Yeah, that level of activity is impressive, especially if it's all running on the blockchain. What about other areas, like AI?
The sources point to AI projects leveraging ICP too. For example, Decide AI, which has apparently processed over 50,000 inference requests on-chain.
AI inference on-chain. Okay.
And another one called Kinnick, which provides AI tooling and vector databases. It's noted as being used for over 3 million searches.
So it suggests ICP's computation model might actually be capable of supporting resource-intensive tasks like AI directly on the blockchain.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. And DeFi, as we said, is strong. You've got decentralized exchanges, DEXs, like ICP Swap and Sonic DX. They show notable volume. Over $10 million was mentioned in one source. They also have that EVM compatibility through something called DFINITY EVM, which is apparently capable of over 1,000 transactions per second.
Faster than standard Ethereum, then.
Considerably. And building on that Bitcoin integration via chain fusion, there are platforms like Odin.fund specifically for trading Bitcoin assets like ordinals and runes. It's noted with over 2,000 Bitcoin in trading volume.
2,000 BTC volume is significant.
Definitely. And another called Liquidium, which allows borrowing against Bitcoin ordinals and runes, sort of DeFi meets Bitcoin NFTs.
Interesting niche. What about payments?
Yep, payment solutions too. ZoxPay is mentioned, processing over $1 million in volume across multiple chains, including ICP.
So it's really being used in diverse ways.
It seems so. Gaming is there too.
Gaming, always a big area for blockchain.
Sources mention Cubitopia, which has mutable NFT islands apparently, Cosmicrafts, Auto Royale, and an isotopic game store.
Okay, a mix of games and infrastructure.
And NFT marketplaces, of course. Entrepod is highlighted, noted with over 1 million ICP in volume. DGDG for browsing NFTs.
Makes sense. Developing tools must be important too.
Absolutely. They list things like Motoko Playground, which lets developers try out ICP's native language.
Motoko.
But also tools like Azel and Kybra, which let developers use familiar languages like TypeScript and Python to build canisters. That lowers the barrier to entry.
It's smart. Use existing skills.
Yeah. And Pseudograph for GraphQL support, plus multiple wallets, Plug Wallet, DFINITY Wallet, OISY Wallet, which offers network custody.
Any user numbers for wallets?
Plug Wallet alone was noted as having over 150,000 users.
Okay, so people are definitely using the ecosystem.
Yeah, the material really makes the case that developers aren't just kicking the tires, they're building real applications across the board.
And leveraging those specific ICP features we talked about, hosting the whole app, reverse gas, cross-chain.
Exactly. It shows they're taking that host everything vision seriously. It even extends to enterprise use cases mentioned in the sources.
Like what?
Origin for tracking luxury goods using NFTs, and Taurus, which offers banking-grade custody solutions on ICP.
Wow, okay. From gaming to banking, that's broad. Okay, so we've looked at what it is, how it works, what's happening now in the ecosystem. Let's talk about the future. Where is ICP headed?
Right, the roadmap. The DFINITY Foundation publishes theirs publicly, which is good for transparency. It outlines key contributions and upcoming milestones. The sources break it down into 9 major themes.
9 themes, like what?
Covers everything, really. The core compute platform, decentralized AI, chain fusion, privacy, platform decentralization itself, identity, digital assets, governance and tokenomics, and developer experience. Pretty comprehensive.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground. What does the roadmap actually show? Any recent progress?
Yeah, what's fascinating is seeing how continuous the development seems to be. The roadmap highlights significant features completed quite recently. Things like improved storage capacity and throughput capabilities rolled out in late 2024. And then fully decentralized edge infrastructure, updated wallets, improved developer coding environments. Those were completed early this year, 2025.
So tangible improvements that affect performance and usability.
Exactly. These aren't just abstract goals. They seem to be delivering concrete updates.
And what about near term? What's listed as in progress?
Looking at items with target dates around, say, June or July 2025.
So pretty soon.
Yeah. The sources mention things like expanding that chain fusion capability to include Solana and Dogecoin.
Okay, more chains.
Further enhancing privacy with decentralized key management, something called vet keys. Decentralizing access logs for better transparency.
Makes sense.
And making it easier for more people to hold governance tokens, broadening participation in the NNS.
So steadily building out those core capabilities across the board.
That's the impression. It raises an important question, though. What's the ultimate endpoint for all this development? What's the long game?
What does it say?
Well, the sources reference a really long-term vision, a 20-year roadmap.
20 years. Okay, that's thinking ahead.
It is. Within 5 years, they envision ICP and its programming language, Motoko, being taught in schools.
Wow.
Within 10 years, the goal is to be seriously competing with and maybe even overtaking the big tech companies in hosting internet services.
Taking on AWS and Google Cloud directly.
That seems to be the ambition and the 20-year vision.
Go on.
For ICP to be fundamentally larger and more impactful than the current centralized internet, hosting crucial global infrastructure, enabling massive improvements in privacy and freedom online.
That is incredibly ambitious. Aiming to replace the internet as we know it.
Pretty much. It's a bold target.
Okay, well, no deep dive into an ecosystem like this is complete without looking at the native token, also called ICP, right?
Correct, the ICP token. It plays a really central role in how the network actually functions.
How so?
Well, besides its role in governance, letting you participate in the NNS, stake your ICP to vote, earn rewards.
The standard governance utility.
Right. It has a few other key functions. It's used to compensate those independent node providers who run the actual hardware infrastructure.
Okay, pays for the network upkeep.
Exactly. And importantly, it's what gets converted into those cycles we talked about earlier.
Ah, the fuel for the dApps.
Precisely. That's how the reverse gas model is implemented economically. ICP is burned to create cycles, which canisters then use to pay for computation and storage.
Got it. Do the sources mention anything about supply? Tokenomics.
Yeah, they mention it has a capped total supply and detail its initial distribution and unlocking back when it launched in May 2021.
Okay. Now, the part everyone always asks about, price. The sources we looked at included some market data and price predictions.
They did. Always interesting, but as you said, definitely needs to be taken with a grain of salt in crypto.
Always. What did they show?
Well, one source, dated October 2024, noted ICP ranked around 26 by market cap at that time, trading near $8. A more recent source put the price lower, around $6.34, but pointed out it had seen some gains after bouncing off certain technical support levels. Market's always moving.
True. What about future predictions? Any forecasts mentioned?
Price forecasts, as you'd expect, cover a pretty wide range. It's crypto, after all.
Yeah.
One projection mentioned in the sources sees a potential maximum price hitting maybe $11 or so for 2025, climbing towards, say, $37 by 2028, and potentially over $100, maybe $113 by 2031.
Okay, that's one outlook. Any others?
Yeah, other analysts cited had different takes for 2025. Some were closer to $14, others projected higher, maybe even over $24, depending on the firm doing the analysis. So quite a spread.
A big range, yeah. And the token's history is pretty wild, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It had that absolutely massive surge right after launch in May 2021, hitting an all-time high of over $750.
$750.
Followed by a really, really steep decline. One source noted it was down like 99% from that peak at one point. Classic crypto volatility.
Definitely. So what's the general sentiment now based on these analysts?
They generally seem to agree it would take a truly massive turnaround, something huge, to revisit those initial highs anytime soon. But many do see promising long-term potential. Crucially, though, that potential seems tied directly to the platform's actual continued development and, more importantly, adoption.
So execution is key, assuming the project keeps delivering on that ambitious roadmap we discussed.
Exactly. This raises, I think, a really important point for anyone looking at the token purely as an investment.
Which is?
Like any investment, especially in tech projects with such grand long-term goals, the market performance is tied to a huge number of factors. Broader market trends play a huge role.
Of course.
But fundamentally, the project's long-term success, and therefore the token's value, likely relies on them actually building out the technology and attracting real users and developers to the network. Does it achieve what it sets out to do?
Makes perfect sense. What's the consistent advice from the sources?
Do your own research thoroughly before making any investment decisions. Standard but essential advice in this space.
Absolutely critical. Wow, okay. That was quite the deep dive into the internet computer.
Covered a lot of ground.
We really did. From that, frankly, revolutionary goal of rebuilding the internet on a decentralized network.
Yeah, quite the mission statement.
To the unique technology powering it to canisters, that reverse gas model, chain fusion for talking to other blockchains.
The tech is definitely different.
Then the ecosystem, seeing the breadth of applications already being built, from social and AI to DeFi and gaming.
Shows developers are engaging with it.
And finally, that incredibly long-term roadmap pushing towards a future Very, very different from the internet we use today.
Yeah, what really stands out for me from all this material is just the sheer scope of the ambition.
Right.
They're not just building another blockchain for, a specific financial use case. They are aiming to host the entire internet stack.
Everything. Software, data.
And fundamentally change how we interact with it online, with a really strong focus on security, decentralization, and, potentially restoring some user privacy and control that's been lost.
Absolutely. And that leads you, the listener, with a really interesting question to ponder, doesn't it? If the Internet Computer's ambitious 20-year vision does materialize, even partially, if a significant chunk of global computation moves onto a decentralized network like this, what kind of new possibilities could that unlock?
For privacy, for freedom of information.
Yeah, and for the kinds of applications that could be built. What could that mean for you in your digital life? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this exploration gives you a solid foundation for understanding the Internet Computer.
What it is, what it's trying to achieve.
And maybe even inspires you to go explore some of the projects building on this, pretty fascinating network yourself.